those of you who watch my videos at night to fall asleep, boy do I have a treat for you. I hope you enjoyed this hour-long video of me talking about glue and wallpaper. Sweet dreams! Hello everybody and welcome to the wallpaper video. I know it sounds exciting, but I have a ton of projects coming up, mainly the Beetlejuice house that I need to add wallpaper to, and recently I've been a little frustrated with my normal wallpaper process. So I have taken several suggestions. Some of them are from my Patreon and my membership, and some of them are just videos that I've seen of other products that other miniaturists are using. And I want to give them all an equal test, and we'll see which one I personally like the best. Now I want to make it clear that this video is not going to say that any one of these products are bad. It may just be that they work better for me, and I'm going to try and test them as evenly as possible. And it may also be that these products aren't the best for wallpaper, but are still really good for other purposes. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. I think these are probably all wonderful products. I'm just looking for the one that's best for my wallpaper needs. And you may be asking, what are your wallpaper needs, Ara? I need the wallpaper to lay flat. I don't want a lot of bubbles. I want there to be limited warping. I know warping's just gonna kind of happen, but I'm looking for minimal warpage. And then I also would love to have something that's easy to move around, that I don't just feel this like immediate stress that I need to get this right the first time or I have to start all over. I am going to make a spreadsheet that is going to have all the different characteristics of these products so that you can look at it and maybe you don't care as much about warping because you know you have really strong walls, so you may end up liking a different product than I do. But I'm using foam board walls, so it is going to be a bit important to me. But I'm just going to put everything I find in the spreadsheet, so hopefully that will be helpful to you as well. I'm also going to be comparing price. So that's going to be the first thing I do, and I'm going to do price per ounce because it's not going to be fair to compare the price of these two products because obviously you get a lot more in this product as compared to this one. If we compare the price per ounce, you may get a better idea of which one is more expensive. I still think it's this one. I will go ahead and walk through the name of each one of these products and the price that I find on Amazon. Of course, you may be able to find them cheaper or more expensive in other places. And then by the end of this video, I'm hoping to use whichever product that comes out as my personal wallpaper favorite on a project. So I don't know which project it is, but hopefully I'm so excited about this wallpaper glue that I just can't wait to wallpaper a room. So here we go. First up, we have Yes Paste, which is $1.84 per ounce, and Sure Grip, which is 38 cents per ounce. Beacon 3-in-1 is $2.73 per ounce, and Collage Matte Medium is $3.40 per ounce. Grandmother Stovers is $2.02 per ounce, and Mod Podge is 56 cents per ounce. Art Glitter Glue is $1.74 per ounce, and these two glue sticks are $2.90 per ounce. So now we're going to move on to carpet tape. I wanted to add this in here because I have been using it a lot recently. However, when I'm doing wallpaper, I usually still stick the wallpaper down to poster board and then use the carpet tape to attach it to the wall. So I wanted to give it a special mention here, but I won't be including it in my experiments. I have a ton of foam board scraps left over from working on the Beetlejuice house. So I do think foam board is going to be what I'm testing on, largely because that is the next project I have coming up. I am going to be wallpapering rooms made from foam board, and I do have some pieces that are double thick in here, so I'm going to try and get some samples out of this that will give us a good idea. I actually do have some MDF. Maybe we'll test some MDF as well. This is going to be a complicated experiment. I cut one rectangle of foam board for each glue that I'm going to be testing. And then instead of cutting down my pieces of MDF, I'm just going to be testing 2 glues per piece of MDF. And now it's the all-important step of reading the directions. This took a little while, but whenever I'm working with a new material, it is very important to read the directions, read all of the safety precautions, and make sure I am using it in the correct way. I'm starting with Mod Podge because that is the glue I am the most familiar with and what I have been using for my wallpapers so far. I have not been happy with the results I've been getting, so this is the one I'm testing, and then everything else can be kind of compared against it. To prep my foam board sheets, I'm just going to sand the side that I'm applying the wallpaper to, remove any of the dust from sanding, and then it has kind of a scuffed up surface to work on. Most of the glues are going to be applied with this foam brush. I'm going to be using the same foam brush, and then I'm using just a typical scrapbook paper. This isn't extra thick, it's just kind of one of the cheaper scrapbook papers that you can get from the craft store. I'm going to be cutting down pieces that I don't think I'll ever use for wallpaper. They're still cute papers, but they're going to be good for this test. And then once again, I'm reading all of the directions, and how come Mod Podge says it has a 4 weeks cure time? I had not noticed that before, or I had blocked it out. Hopefully we're not going to have to wait 4 weeks for this to finish up. Another instruction I read on the back is to add Mod Podge not only to the surface you are gluing onto, but onto the back of the paper that you're applying. So we're going to be following those directions. I do not typically do this, and this may be one of the reasons I've been so frustrated with this product when it comes to applying paper. I'm using a paper towel to squish everything down, just going from the center and moving outward, trying to make sure if I get any Mod Podge on the paper towel that I am folding it under so I have a clean surface. And that's all I'm going to do to apply it to the foam board. When it comes to the MDF, I'm following these same exact steps. The reason I'm testing it on both is because MDF is a little bit stronger. As I'm laying down each paper sample, I am doing what I'm calling a wiggle test, where I'm seeing if I can wiggle the paper back and forth. This is going to allow me to slide my wallpaper into place and be a little bit more confident with its placement. I am going to be following the same exact steps for each glue. This is Grandmother Stover's glue, and I'm showing you on the back. It says, it has a lot of promises that it will not curl, it will not discolor. It works great with paper, so we're going to give it a try. I will be showing you how thick each glue is. This is a very thick paste, and I had to push down pretty hard on my foam brush to get it spread out. But it does have a long dry time, so I didn't have to worry about it drying before I added the paper. I am trying to remember to do the wiggle test on each one. This one had a little bit of wiggle as I placed down the paper. The next glue is very similar to Grandmother Stover's, if not the exact same thing. As you can see, it is also very, very thick, and I had to press pretty hard into the material to get it to come out of the bottle. This is Yes Paste, and I'm going to be applying it in the same exact way. It was very similar, as I had a lot of work time with it, so I didn't have to worry about it drying out. And then I feel like it did have just a little bit more wiggle, but it did still take hold pretty quickly. The next glue that we're testing out is Sure Grip. This is a real-life wallpaper paste. I wanted to test something that should be available in most hardware stores around the world to see how well it would work for dollhouse wallpaper. It did say on the back to protect my skin, so I'm making sure to wear gloves, although I hate having to do extra protection, so this kind of was a negative in its column to have to go find gloves and wear gloves during the entire process, but we'll see how it does. This was a very thin material, so it was easy to apply. And then it did have some wiggle to it when I laid down the paper. I did both the MDF sample and the foam board sample, and then set them to the side to dry. One thing I did notice is that at the bottom of the sample on the MDF, it was wrinkling a little bit at the bottom. So I don't know if that was an application error on my part, but I was able to press it down into the glue, and then it eventually did dry flat. I did not seem to have that same issue on the foam board sample, so it may have just been my fault. Now I'm moving on to Art Glitter Glue and Collage Matte Medium. Both of these glues are really big in the paper crafting community, and so I really wanted to give these a good test. There were not a ton of instructions on how to use this glue, so it may be that some of you who know this glue really well may be screaming in the comments that I didn't quite use it right, but it was a very creamy, luxury looking glue, and it went on very, very smooth. It almost seemed like some kind of face cream, although don't put it on your face. It looks tempting, but it is only for putting onto art projects. I was kind of surprised that there wasn't as much wiggle time with this glue. It took hold very quickly. However, it may have more wiggle time if you do a thicker application, but this is the most expensive glue on the list, so the more glue you have to add to get the effects, the more difficult it will be to use that glue because you're worrying about running out. I have heard a lot of amazing things about art glitter glue, so I am really excited to try this glue, not just in this experiment, but later on with other things I'm doing in the miniature world. The instructions say you have to supply your own nib or your own glue bottle, so for now I'm just going to be pouring it onto the surface and spreading it thin like the other glues with my sponge brush. It was also at this time I decided to do another test, which is to test what happens if I accidentally get the glue on the surface of my paper. So for each sample, I'm going to be adding a dab of the glue. This is going to help me see, does it dry completely clear and does it dry matte? In other words, how well am I going to be able to see this glue on the surface of my wallpaper if I mess up? So I went back and added the same test onto all of my other samples I've previously done. Now I'm going to move on to Beacon 3-in-1. This is an acetone-based glue, which means it doesn't have a lot of water content in it. This is a fantastic glue to have in these tests because it shouldn't warp as much of other glues with water content. So if this works great, it might be an awesome alternative. I laid it down with the glue nozzle, but then again used my sponge brush so it matched my other samples and had an even shot as the other ones did. One thing I do already know about these acetone-based glues is that they do dry rather quickly, so I felt like I was a bit in a rush to get everything spread thin and then to get the paper on top of the sample. And because of its quick drying time, I had almost no wiggle time to get my paper in place. Once it was stuck down, it was stuck down. I also added my test on the surface of the paper to see how it would react. And I should have seen this coming, but for some reason it didn't register. The acetone in the acetone-based glue basically ruined my sponge brush, but that is okay because the next glue we are testing does not need a brush at all. It is this stick of glue, which I think is either said Uhu or UHU. I'm not sure how I'm going to say it, but this is a stick of glue that I have researched and found to be one of the strongest glue sticks. So we are going to give it a try. Typically, I don't have a high opinion of glue sticks. This comes from a former elementary art teacher who constantly was picking up pieces of art projects that had fallen off due to the glue stick not holding. But I definitely believe in second chances, so let's try out this glue stick and see how it does. I did almost forget to do the wiggle test here. I started to lay it down, but then I remembered, and there was no wiggle happening after I had first laid it down. So that is all of the testing laid out on foam board and MDF, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results. I've officially completed the first step of the tests. I'm already seeing some results, but I'm gonna let everything dry 24 hours to give them all a chance to settle, to do their thing. And I'm not going to officially judge anything until tomorrow. Some of them may request a longer drying time, like Mod Podge says it needs 4 weeks cure time. Why have I never seen that before? But if I'm working on a dollhouse project, I really don't want to wait more than my glue drying 24 hours so that I can continue forward. So if there's a sample that's not performing well after 24 hours worth of drying time, it's going to be a thumbs down from me. And I'm very tired of cleaning this little brush, which now it's destroyed anyway, so yeah, that's a goner. Here are all the samples laid out that I just completed. They're all in a similar spot in the room, so they should have similar conditions to dry in. It's the next day and all of my samples have been drying overnight, so they should be good to go. I also made a chart and I am going to chart my findings. I will link this chart down in the description box below. It will be smaller than this, but you can check it out if you want to see the results of all my experiments for yourself. Already I can see some warping. This is the Mod Podge piece, which doesn't surprise me. Mod Podge warps, it does do that. And it's a bit shiny. So this is the sample I'm very familiar with, Mod Podge, and it did all the things I expected it to do. So now it's time to look into all of the other glues. On my chart, you can see all of the things I was able to figure out just from reading the label. And now I'm going to fill in the warp, bubbles that I find without the finish, and whether or not the glue dries clear or matte. And then I have some other information I was able to gather during the experiments, such as wiggle time, and then some other items that we will do later after I add a finish on top of these pieces of paper. As I stated earlier, the Mod Podge did warp the foam board, as you can see a little bit better here close up. So I'm going to fill in that information. It had a little bit of warp on the MDF. This MDF is 1/8 inch thick, so typically dollhouse walls, say from Real Good Toys, are about 1/4 inch thick, so they'd probably fare even better than this MDF, and it was just a very minor warp to it. The wet on wet application I did for this seemed to work really well, and I could not see any bubbles without the finish added to it. And then it did dry clear, but there was a slight shine, so I noted that in my chart as well. The next test is going to be the removal ease. How easy is it to remove from my surfaces? And it was not easy to remove the Mod Podge. It ripped the paper. It did not want to let go of the surface. One thing I did want to note about Grandmother Stover's and Yes Paste is that it does have a sticky finish, and I realized that was my fault because I wasn't cleaning up any excess glue from the sides, and it does say to do that after application, so that was me. But in the center where I had a thin layer of glue, it dried completely and was not sticky, so that was a me problem. There was no warp on Grandmother Stover's, so I noted that in my chart. Now I'm going to start going a little bit more quickly through all of the samples and marking down the information because this would take forever if I'm showing you each and every test. I will point out some that were a little bit different, such as the Sure Grip and the Art Glitter Glue. I was able to get quite a chunk off at the ends, but I do think that was an application error on my part. Now the 3-in-1 kind of behaved as I thought it would. I was able to get a lot off, and you could even see where the glue was applied, but I think the glue started to dry before the paper could take hold. And I kind of figured this would happen with the acetone glue. I was very curious about the UHU stick to see how it would do, and I was able to get so much of the paper off with ease that I started to get really concerned about this stick glue. It's kind of started to confirm my prejudice about glue sticks. However, I was noticing there were parts that were sticking really strongly. So once I got to the center, I was like, okay, this is really strong here. I don't think it dried too quickly, so perhaps it was my fault not applying enough glue in all of the areas. So I decided to give it a second chance. I am going to re-glue down the UHU stick and see if it is an application issue because I'm just not used to working with glue sticks. So I flipped over my foam board, I re-sanded it, removed the sand dust from it, and then stuck down the paper once more. This time I am going to do a very thick application of the glue stick all over the surface. Now I do want to state that I would not want to do this for an entire wall because there's more chance that you would be missing areas because it's just such a large space. But I did go over and over and over this piece of foam board. As you can see, I left in all of the footage of how long I stuck down glue stick to this piece, and we're going to retry this piece of paper. I'm going to let it dry for a few hours and we'll test it later in the video. I'm going to test out 2 finishes with each one of these glue. I'm going to do a brush on finish. Mod Podge is my favorite finish for paper. I think it gives it a nice thick coverage of protection. However, as you can see with this Beacon 3-in-1 sample, there are a lot of bubbles. When you do not get a consistent application of glue keeping your paper glued to your wall, you're going to get bubbles. You can see the difference between the glue stick on the right and the Beacon 3-in-1 on the left. It's just that Beacon 3-in-1 dried too quickly. However, to my surprise, all of the other ones seem to be very flat. If there is any product out there that's going to find a flaw in your wallpaper, it is Mod Podge. It will create a bubble for you. So there were a few other little bubbles towards the edges, but all in all, most of the samples stayed flat. I will check them again once they dry completely because sometimes those bubbles calm down. I also wanted to test a spray finish. I don't have a matte spray finish at the moment. I just had this triple thick spray, but I figured that would be a good test on these glue samples to see how they would react to a spray finish. This is also an important test to make because a lot of people do prefer to protect their papers with a spray. So I added the spray on there and everything looked good. I did not see any issues with the spray. There was no bubbling, no discoloring, nothing. So I guess we'll call that a win for all. I have all of my results in front of me, so I'm going to start making some decisions on the first round of tests. And you're like, first round? Yes. Once I find some glues that I think are really great for wallpapering, I want to do a few other experiments to find like the ultimate glue. When it came to the spray finish, I really didn't see a difference. And all of the Mod Podge samples where I did a spreadable finish on top of the paper, they all did fairly similarly except for the Beacon 3-in-1. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start narrowing down my glues. I'm going to talk about some glues that are very similar, and then really the only difference between them is going to be price. First, we're going to talk about Yes Paste and Grandmother Stover's. I have been told that they are the same thing, and my tests have revealed that that seems pretty accurate. They're both really good. Yes Paste, you're going to get more in the tub, and I don't know if that's the reason why, but it does come out cheaper when you look per ounce. So I'm going to be keeping both of these. I'm going to put this in my travel tool case, and this one's just going to stay in my glue collection here in the studio. So I'm going to move Yes Paste forward, and Grandmother Stover's, just know that if this is the only one you can get, it's still the same stuff. It's just going to be a tiny bit pricier. Another two glues that I found to be very similar was the Art Glitter Glue and the Mod Podge. They're both really easy to spread, and they both caused some warpage when it came to the foam board. But on the MDF, it was minor warpage. Make sure I'm saying the right thing. The benefit that Mod Podge has is it's about 1/3 of the price when you compare it to the Art Glitter Glue. And when I did the wet on wet technique, where it's like you put the wet Mod Podge on the back of the paper and the wet Mod Podge onto the surface, I had a lot more working time when it came to this product over this product. This product grabbed almost immediately. Again, this is not me saying that this is a bad glue. There are several times where you want something to grab immediately, and I do look forward to trying Art Glitter Glue more in the future, trying it for different purposes, just trying it as I glue things together in my miniature journey. But I don't think it's going to be the glue that I'm grabbing for when I am working on my wallpaper. So for the next round, I'm going to move Mod Podge forward. The next product was the Collage Medium Matte, and while I did like this product, it was probably the smoothest to apply. I don't really think there were as many benefits to using this to make up for the price of this product. There wasn't enough wiggle time. It was just a very little bit of wiggle time, as I'm calling it, to kind of get your wallpaper in place. Now, I do think this is probably a product that's more used to be mixed with other things, and it's a collage medium, so it is meant to be used with paper. For my wallpaper purposes, I don't think I'm going to move forward with this one at this time. This Sure Grip was the cheapest glue on the list at 38 cents per ounce. It performed well in all of my tests. It just had a little bit of warpage. And because of the price, I may be willing to overlook the fact that it warns you to wear protective gear like gloves and things like that. So I'm gonna give it a few more chances just because this is probably a product that's easy for people to get, and just testing a general wallpaper paste is probably a good idea in the next few tests just to know where we stand. So I'm going to be continuing to work with this one. The Beacon 3-in-1 had the most bubbles, it was easy to pull off, and I think the reason for that is it just dries too fast as I'm trying to apply it to the surface. So this is a fantastic glue. I know for a fact this is a wonderful glue. I've used Fabri-Tac, which is similar. It's not exactly the same, but a similar glue to this. And having a glue like this in your collection is great. But it's just not going to be a wonderful wallpaper glue. I have heard it's good for small wallpaper application purposes because it doesn't warp things. There's no water content in this glue. So if you're doing wallpaper in half scale or 1/48 scale, this might be something you can try out if you're really worried about warping. But for 1/12 scale and for the projects I have coming up, this is not going to be the wallpaper glue for me. So it will not be continuing forward in our next experiments. And finally, we have the Uhu stick. I know I'm saying that incorrectly, the UHU stick. And I really wanted this to work. It was just a little bit too easy for me to tear off the sample. And that makes me concerned for the longevity of my wallpaper application. And I really thought I was putting an even layer on, but if you're not sure what an even layer looks like because you're just going over and over it with a glue stick, then it can be kind of hard to know if you're getting a good application with your wallpaper. I did do one further test. Now this has only been drying for a few hours now, so it has not been the 24-hour test, and it's had a spray finish over the top of it, so it's a little bit different than our earlier test. But I'm gonna try and pull this paper off. This was me re-sticking it down with the UHU glue, and let's see how it handles here. Okay, actually, all right. It is actually holding its own, so that's kind of exciting. I really wanted a stick glue to work. I really did. Okay. All right, so that held so much better. I think it's because I went over and over and over and over this surface with this glue stick to make sure I had a full and thick coverage of glue before I put the paper down. So maybe it's just a matter of knowing how to apply this. So I am going to move the glue stick forward just so that we have a glue stick option. And I also know that this is not an American brand, and this may be easier to find for people in other countries. So let's move forward with the glue stick. So the glues we have moving into the next round is the Sure Grip, the Yes Paste, the Mod Podge is still moving forward. I think this is a great one to move forward with because it's one that everyone is pretty familiar with. It's one that I have used multiple times in videos, and it's just a great one to compare against. And then the Uhu or the UHU stick, this one is going to move forward as well. I must now update my chart with the next line of experiments and which glues are going to be tested. Now you may be saying, Aira, what is left to test? Now that we've found glues that work really well for a generic paper application, I would love to test some other things that people use for wallpaper, specifically in dollhouse projects, and see how these hold up. For example, I had some patrons mention that they like to use fabric as wallpaper, which I think is an amazing idea and really opens up the world of what you can put on your dollhouse walls. So it would be interesting to see how these all react with fabric being your main wallpaper. I also know a lot of people like to print their wallpapers, so if you're printing a paper with an inkjet printer, will these products cause that ink to run? Will it kind of pull up? I don't know. So we're going to test a few of those things, and whichever one seems to work the best in most situations, I want to use to wallpaper an entire room so that I can get the full experience of working with the glue. I'm really hoping it doesn't end up being Mod Podge because that's what I started with and I had been getting really frustrated with it. However, I have learned a few things about Mod Podge since I started. that might help me. So I guess it's time to prep some more practice boards. I'll just use the same ones I've been using. I can use the back. I have set up one board per glue, and I put the title of the glue at the top of the board. Each board is going to have 5 tests. The first test is testing out thin paper, so this is just paper off of the computer, like printer paper. I will show you each of these tests with the Mod Podge, and then like I did before, I'll kind of speed through the other ones and show you any differences. So the reason I want to test thin paper is to see if it makes it see-through, if it has any tearing, just because the thin paper can't handle the liquid content in the glue. So that's why I'm testing thin paper. Next, I'm going to be testing an inkjet printed paper. This was printed at least 3 years ago because I printed it for my Fairfield project, and it's just been in storage since then. I'm using quite a bit of Mod Podge to see if I can get the ink to run, because this, like I said, is very, very dried, and I do get it to run a little bit. I'll be testing this with each glue as best as I can. The next test is the 10-second test. I put the paper down, counted to 10, and then pulled it back up to re-stick it down. This is to simulate if you put down a piece of paper, realize you have it in the wrong spot, and then pull it up to try and place it down again. The next test is going to be over fabric to see how well it holds the fabric down to your surface. So I'm just using a simple piece of cotton fabric for that. The next test is if it works as a good finish, and I had this comment from Mlippy and I wanted to try it out. This is the wet on wet on wet technique with Mod Podge, where you add wet glue to your surface, wet glue to the back of the paper, and while everything is still wet, you add wet glue to the top to be your finish. So this is what I want to test out. Now, this is something you should only use if you're not worrying about warping, because this is adding a lot of moisture to your surface. So just keep that in mind, but I definitely wanted to give it a good test as far as my finish goes. And what I mean by finish is just a protective layer on whatever you're using as wallpaper. I also decided to do this test on half of the fabric, so you can see the difference if you add whatever glue we're using on top of your fabric wallpaper. Because I ruined my foam brush, I decided to use a paintbrush with the Yes paste, which is what is suggested on the side of the container. However, it was taking forever to get the glue down. I felt like it wasn't going down smoothly. Now it does say on the side you can add water, but I did not want to add water content yet, because if I added too much, that would be human error and kind of give you maybe a false view of this glue. So I decided to use a paper towel to lay down my Yes paste. I do later towards the end of the video get a different method, so stay tuned for that. I did my ink test, my 10-second test, which seemed to work really well. And then when I got to the test over the finish, I did add some water just so we could get an idea, because there was no way I was going to be able to spread this over the paper with a paper towel without just ripping the paper up. So I decided to add a little bit of water to the Yes paste and put it over the top of my paper, and we'll see how that comes out. I did the same 5 tests for the Sure Grip, which is the real-life wallpaper paste, and boy did it not like inkjet printed papers. It really did not take much for it to make the ink bleed onto the MDF. I did all of the other steps, although I did notice that once I did my finish on top of my paper, it started to wrinkle at the edge. And if you remember, I had the same issue earlier when I did my first experiments with the Sure Grip. So I'm not really sure what's going on there, but for the most part it did okay. I did try to use the glue stick to get the ink to run, didn't have much success there. And then I did my 10-second test for the glue stick. And it may seem a little ridiculous to try to use a glue stick as a finish on top of fabric or paper. However, I did this for every other glue, and I figured, what could it hurt to try it out? And sometimes doing a test that seems a little ridiculous gives you interesting results. Results you may not have thought to try beforehand. So now I'm going to let everything dry. Again, it's all drying in the same spot with the same conditions. So hopefully we'll have some interesting results pretty soon. I feel like these are probably dry enough for me to make my assessments. I'm just gonna read them all at once, like a very thick newspaper here. So all of the thin paper tests look good. I mean, they're not see-through. That was one of the things I was kind of worried about, is if the glue would make the paper see-through. None of them have extra wrinkles any more than the thicker paper, so even with computer paper, all of them work pretty well. As far as the ink test, there was a little bit of ink bleed on the Mod Podge, which I knew there would be because I've seen that before. Nothing on the Yes Paste. On the Sure Grip, I was incredibly surprised. It made the ink bleed the most. So there's quite a bit of green over here, and then it made the image fuzzy. So if you're someone who likes to print your wallpapers with an inkjet printer, that may be something to consider if you're looking at Sure Grip. Just know that if you get it on the print, it may muddle it and just kind of smear it places. There was a little bit of green that got pulled off with the glue stick, so I didn't see that initially, but I can just kind of see a green hue now, but I really don't think it's anything to be concerned with. I really had to like push hard on the paper for that to happen. So for the 10-second test, I'm going to now try to pull these papers off because all of them were pulled off and then placed back on after 10 seconds. I didn't add any extra glue. I just wanted to see if it was possible to remove it and then place it back on. And now I want to see, did it re-adhere very well? Mod Podge is good. The Yes Paste seems good. Ooh, hold on. Okay, the Sure Grip seems to have not held very well on the edges. And that could have been my fault, but I was able to get quite a bit of paper off of the Sure Grip on the 10-second test. And actually the glue stick held pretty well, so I'm kind of surprised by that. This little glue stick is really impressing me at the moment. So for the fabric test, what I'm going to do is try to remove the fabric, see how easy that is, and then I'm just going to look at the area that I covered with the same glue to see if it changed the color of the fabric, if it makes a good finish for the fabric. We'll just see. Okay, it was much harder to pull up the fabric with the Mod Podge. I was able to pull it up, but it was easier to pull up with the Yes Paste. It still stuck down pretty well, but it was not that hard to like rip it off if I really wanted to. Same with, oh, the Sure Grip does not work super well with fabric. Yes Paste and Mod Podge was holding much better than the Sure Grip. So no Sure Grip with fabric. That, it's like it didn't even hold on to it very well. Oh, and the glue stick is holding pretty well. I'd say that the glue stick, the Oohoo stick, and the Yes Paste were about the same amount of grab with the fabric, and the Mod Podge was the strongest. So if you're going to use fabric as wallpaper, I would probably use Mod Podge on it, just because it's going to hold the best. Although I think Yes Paste would be fine, and then if you wanted to cover it with something, let's look how the covers. You can definitely see the difference in color with the Mod Podge, but the Yes Paste actually kept its same color, but I can tell that it's on there. It feels, I don't know how to describe it. It feels a little rougher than the original fabric, but it feels like it might be a bit more like protected. Let me see if it's harder to rip off this side. It's not necessarily harder to rip off, but it does make the fabric stiffer. So I'm guessing maybe it would have more protection with the Yes Paste and not change the color of your fabric as much. Sure Grip, we know that it is not going to hold your fabric down, so I'm not sure I would even get this to be a finish on your fabric if it's not going to hold the fabric to the wall. So we won't even look at that one. And the glue stick as a finish, I just kind of did that because I did that with all of the other glues. It's okay. There's not anything special about it. I would probably still choose something else if I was going to put a finish on my fabric. The last test we did was the finish, and this was a piece that I did the wet on wet on wet technique that was suggested to me, and it is completely flat. It is probably the flattest piece of Mod Podging I have ever done. So if you are comfortable with that technique and you don't feel like you're going to be getting Mod Podge all over the place, and you're not worried about warping, this could be a really great technique to get a very flat and very protected piece of paper. So that's pretty cool. I still like Mod Podge as a finish. It's just one of my favorites. The Yes Paste, I think, I mean, I did put it on there. I cannot see it. So if you're looking for a really matte finish, that may be a good option for you. Yeah, it didn't bubble, it didn't wrinkle. So the Yes Paste, I don't really know if you should use it as a finish. I was just testing it. But it did go on the paper, but I just can't see it now. So it may be, if you get paste on the paper, you may just go ahead and cover the whole thing and it will just, you won't even be able to tell. So as far as the Sure Grip goes, I had this one wrinkle up as I was using it. I tried to do a similar technique that was done with the Mod Podge, where I put the Sure Grip down, then I placed the paper, and then immediately tried to do the finish on top, and it wrinkled up this edge and it wouldn't let me flatten it back down. So I probably wouldn't use the Sure Grip as a finish on top of the paper. And then finally, the glue stick. It actually has a very interesting texture. I really didn't think I was going to like this. It kind of reminds me of some of those wallpapers from the 90s that kind of had like a swirly texture to it, because it's not flat. Again, I don't know if this is a good idea to put glue stick all over your paper, but it does feel like there is a covering on it. It does feel like it's protected. So that's an interesting outcome. You know, that's one of the things with these experiments. I can do something that seems ridiculous, like putting glue stick all over the outside of the paper, and get an interesting result. So I'm going to put all this information into my chart, and then I'm going to make my final decision on the products I'm going to be using moving forward with my wallpapering project. For me, I don't think the answer is going to be one single product. I think it's going to be perhaps a mixture of products. So one of them I feel like I can remove right now is the Sure Grip. The Sure Grip was the lowest priced product on the list because this is a real life-size wallpaper paste. And I do still think that this could possibly be something that could be used. If this is all you can find, it is still a really good product. It laid the papers down flat. I am just at this point getting really choosy on the features that I'm looking for. For me, Mod Podge is still winning out as the best finish, and it's going to be the best for holding fabric type wallpaper in place. So Mod Podge is still a really good option, and compared to some of the other glues, fairly cheap. I think the winner for laying down the paper flat, making sure that it's not too glossy. If I make a mistake, it's not showing up too much, not having any bubbles, easy to apply, non-toxic, all of that comes down to Yes Paste. And like I said, this is very similar to Grandmother Stover's. This just happens to be a little bit cheaper. So when it comes to laying down paper, this is going to be my option over this. This is my finish. This is going to be what I'm using to lay the paper down with. I feel like there were a lot less bubbles with this than with Mod Podge. And I have to say, I'm very impressed with this glue stick. If you watch my previous glue video, which I will put down in the description box, I had a very poor opinion of glue sticks, but this glue stick has held up against some of these other products, and I'm excited to have it. I'm excited to have it in my glue collection, and I'm going to try to wallpaper with it in my upcoming project in this video. So I think my answer for the perfect wallpaper combo would be these three. If you ask me to just pick one, only one, it's probably got to be the Yes Paste. If someone said, hey, you're gonna be wallpapering for the rest of your life, it has to be flat, it has to look good, we don't want any bubbles, we don't want you to have to ever redo it, this would be the one I would choose. But because I usually like protecting my wallpaper in my projects, I'm going to be using this with it. Now I'm going to be putting together one of my own kits. This is the fireplace room box. I need to create one of these for my sales table, and it does involve wallpaper, and cardboard can be one of the most difficult things to wallpaper, so let's truly put it to the test. The first thing I had to do was read the instructions because it has been a very long time since I've put together one of my own fireplace rooms. But it's a really fun kit and I'm looking forward to finishing the inside. I have my first walls ready to wallpaper, and I put up a poll with my patrons and members of several different types of wallpaper, and they ended up going more towards the red, and that's according to the furniture that I already have in the space. So I did find one other wallpaper that I didn't ask them about, but I think might be cool. It's got like a little flower pattern. I think it would be nice, kind of elegant for this room. I don't really think you're gonna notice it all that much. There's not a ton that's wallpapered in this area. And just last night, as I've been wrapping up this experiment, I saw a post from Sue's Small Obsession on Instagram, and she was giving her tips on how to work with grandmother Stover's glue. So I'm gonna put that in here and just say a big thank you to Sue for allowing me to share this. And because the Yes paste that I'm about to use is very similar to this, I'm going to try and follow her steps. All of her projects come out looking amazing, and I do believe her post was one of the places I first learned about this type of glue. But if you're anything like me, I learned the hard way. I actually have to put in the work to figure out what I like, because I can watch several videos and see people use things, but if I don't actually go through the steps of like trying it myself, I don't know what works with my style of putting together a room, my style of crafting. Okay, so I think it's time to finally put what I've learned into practice and wallpaper a wall. I do eventually want to add wainscoting to the lower part of this wall, so I'm only going to be wallpapering the top part, which means I can save my wallpaper. I did cut it in half and I drew a line where I thought the wallpaper would hit at the bottom of the wall, and then I spread my Yes paste with my paper towel method, which I do change out in just a little bit. I added my wallpaper down along the line I drew, and then I don't know if I grabbed the wrong piece of wallpaper, but it did not seem to work anymore. As you can see, there is a bit of cardboard showing at the top of the wallpaper. I did notice that about halfway through flattening it with a old library card, and I was like, okay, well, this is the time to test if I can lift it up and stick it back down. I do have limited sheets of this wallpaper, so I'm very glad I went through the process of making sure that this is a glue that I can lift up the paper and re-stick it down. I'm following Sue's suggestion of flattening it with a card, and this is so much easier than using my fingers, than using a rolled up piece of paper towel, and I do think it gets the paper very, very flat. This is just an old library card. I actually have a couple of these, and I will start using another card for laying the glue down. I did this for 2 walls. Both walls are going to kind of mirror each other. I also had another paper towel that was just a little bit damp that helped get the glue off my fingers. And as you could see, it also collected some of the laser ash that comes off of the cardboard walls. I also used a damp paper towel to clean up any excess glue outside of the wallpaper. That way it would dry quickly and I wouldn't have any excess tackiness like I felt in my initial test. I cut off any extra paper that I didn't need, and my 2 walls were complete. And after using Yes paste in all of my experiments, I felt pretty confident, and this was a fairly stress-free process, whereas previously I would have been worried about warping, I would have been worried that the Mod Podge was drying before I got my paper put down correctly, so I really enjoyed this process more than I have in the past. The wallpaper is looking so good in here that I'm kind of nervous to put the Mod Podge on top of it because I don't know if it will make the cardboard dimple. And what I mean by that is I don't know if you'll be able to see like the texture of the cardboard underneath the paper. So it's so flat and so nice. I'm gonna do a test probably on this back wall because this back wall isn't seen in the final room. I'm gonna lay down a different piece of paper and then do the same process, although I am going to try using the new card, laying down with a card so I'm not having to use a paper towel because I think the paper towel could be soaking up some of the glue, so I'm losing some of my material. And then also, like if I use it enough, the bits of paper towel start coming off and it's just kind of gross. So I'm gonna try spreading it with the card and see if that works. Put my practice paper down, let that dry for a little bit, and then I'm gonna try Mod Podge over it before I do this, because I may just do a spray finish on this. I'm not sure, but I'm loving it. So basically, I'm using two old library cards that look very different from each other. One is red and one is blue. I'm using one of them to lay the glue down flat, so this is going to have a stickiness on one side, but it is getting the glue to spread very easily. I feel like I can pick up excess glue and move it to other areas, and I think this is just going to be a much more efficient way to use my glue and not feel like I'm losing some of it every time I apply. Then I'm going to lay down my paper on top of that and then use the other card that is a totally different color, so it's easy to know which card I'm picking up. This one is clean, doesn't have any glue on it, and I'm going to use this to lay the paper down flat. And I think this process was the easiest way to apply the wallpaper, feel like I wasn't going to get any glue on top of the paper itself, and get everything looking really good. I let this all dry, and now I'm going to add my Mod Podge on top. The paper looks flat, it looks awesome, so this is going to be my test on whether adding Mod Podge, which has a lot of moisture in it, is going to pick up the cardboard texture, which as you can see, it does. Now it may be already picking up this texture with my paper I laid down on the sides. However, you can't see it because there's not a glossy finish on it. So I think I'm going to skip the Mod Podge on this one. I would totally put it on my foam board walls or MDF walls. It's just that cardboard is a little bit of a pill when it comes to the cardboard texture showing through. Another way to combat the texture is to first wallpaper onto some poster board and then put the poster board onto the cardboard, and then you won't see any of that dimpling. However, I just really wanted to give this a good test and see how good I could make it look. I'm adding some more wallpaper to the back wall, which means these walls are going to meet at a 90-degree angle, which I am going to look forward to connecting those wallpaper pieces and hopefully making them look very cohesive. I did realize you will see part of the back wall, which is going to be behind the bookcases, so I'm tracing those out, and I'm going to add some matching wallpaper to the back, which you will see once the shelves are in place. I'm again using the two card method where I use a card to lay down the yes paste, and then I'm laying down my wallpaper and then laying it flat with a clean card. Because we're solely focusing on wallpaper in this video, I'm not going to show you how I put the bookcases together. I'm going to do that off camera. But once they were done, I was able to add my basically faux wall into this piece. And now you can see how my two pieces of wallpaper are going to connect together in the corner. If I was wallpapering an already constructed room, I would have put my corner connector down first and then my wallpaper on top of it, my big pieces of wallpaper on top of it. But because I'm having to connect these afterwards, after the room is constructed, I'm going to put my corner connector over my two pieces. I figured this was a great time to give the glue stick a chance to shine. This is such a small piece of paper, it would be kind of annoying to try and get the yes paste on the back of it with a giant library card. So I am going to fully cover the back of it with the glue stick, plus the glue stick dried fairly matte, so I feel like if I mess up trying to get this in the corner, you're not going to see it that much on top of my already placed pieces of wallpaper. So I pre-bent this into an L shape, added my glue onto the back, and now I'm just going to press it into the corner so that it blends in with my previously applied wallpaper pieces. This method works best with wallpaper that has vertical stripes because it's very easy to hide the connection, but I still think it works fairly well, especially on this busy pattern, and once the room is full of everything, you won't even be looking in the corners. It'll just look like one cohesive piece of wallpaper, hopefully. I cut off any of the excess sticking up, and here is the finished piece. Now it does look like you can see a little bit of the cardboard texture here, but there is a slight horizontal pattern going on in the background of the paper, so that's a little bit what you're seeing. But mostly to my eye, it looks very flat, and I'm very happy with the application. This wallpaper is starting to look pink to me. I wasn't going for pink, I was going for red. At least it's an orangey pink, I guess. I'm gonna kind of leave you on a cliffhanger for today. I'm not gonna be finishing up this room. I do have a vlog coming out probably next after you see this video where I will continue to work on this room because I need to get it completed for the Texas Miniature Showcase, which is coming up in June. So stay tuned for that if you were enjoying this project. As far as wallpaper glue goes, I think these are going to be my two powerhouse glues that are just always going to be what I reach for when I go for wallpaper. The Yes Paste was really easy to apply, and I was very happy with using two different cards, one to lay the glue down and then a clean card to flatten the paper over the glue. And I think it would have worked even better on a completely flat surface and not something dimpled like cardboard. I will leave links to both of these if you want to try them out on your own. But as I said earlier, all of the glues that I tried out today are all good glues. They just may not all be great for every wallpapering situation or even wallpaper in general. And if you're saying, Aira, I can't get Yes Paste where I'm at, it's too expensive, I totally understand. This Sure Grip did work. So this is just a real life wallpaper adhesive, and it was one of the least expensive on the list. So I highly suggest, if you're saying that these you can't get or they're too expensive for you, go get some wallpaper paste. And I've even heard people say that they can get this stuff at the dollar store. You probably don't want to use it if you're printing wallpaper off of your printer, but I didn't have any issues using it with a pre-printed scrapbook paper like these. And also, don't use it with fabric. That didn't seem to work very well. All that to say, there is still a glue that will work for you in your location, in your price point. You may just have to do some of your own testing, and I hope I kind of gave you some ideas on some things you can test if you're interested about a glue. I think that wraps up my wallpaper experiment for today. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Let me know if you're interested in seeing more on this project. And let me know if you already knew everything that I showed you today and you're going, I've been telling you to use that glue for years. I've known of their existence, but today I got to really get in there and try them out. And if you had told me about these, you were right. They are amazing. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. I know I usually put bloopers at the end of the video, but I wanted to let you know of two things coming up. Next month, I will be at the Tom Bishop Show in Chicago. I'm not gonna have a table, I'm not teaching a class, I'm just gonna be walking around, shopping, enjoying the show. So if you're there, make sure you stop me and say hi. That is the weekend of April 26th, and I'll put a link in the description box below if you're interested in looking into it a little bit more. And the Texas Miniature Showcase is coming up the weekend of June 21st, and I will leave the link below there as well. I will have a table and I will be teaching a class. So be sure to look into it if you're in the area. And that's all. Whew, it is warm today.